Joining us now on Six News, Libertarian MLC in the New South Wales Parliament, John Ruddick. Really nice to have you back here.
Good to see you, Leo.
So let's just start off with the announcement that came out a few hours before we spoke from the federal government announcing that Australia will recognise a Palestinian state officially at the UN General Assembly. That's next month. Do you support that move personally?
Well, look, I suppose yes. I think the majority of Australians do. There was an opinion poll out this afternoon saying that it's a got popular support, but I think a couple of important things need to be said. There's about 200 members of the United Nations, 200 member countries. 147 of them already recognise the state of Palestine. Okay, so I don't know. It's very likely not going to achieve the reality on the ground. And then, of course, we've got the United States in the Security Council have got a veto. So it's unlikely that Palestine will be recognised as a UN member in September. But yeah, look, it can only be, it's certainly a step in the right direction rather than the wrong direction. I look at Gaza today and I see a lot of rubble. I see, basically 90% of people there have been displaced. Now, the West Bank is a more functional society, and there hasn't really been that much terrorism coming out of the West Bank, but there's still a ton of settlers going in there. Which every US president since the 1980s has said, "Hey, Mr. Israeli Prime Minister, you shouldn't be doing this." And they say, "Oh, we won't do it," but then they keep. In May this year, there was more Israeli settlers going to the West Bank than had happened in about 3 decades. So, still not looking real optimistic.
So your decision the other weekend to march at that Sydney pro-Palestine march, which was obviously, tens of thousands, just shy of about 100,000 people. We've seen some of the numbers given, has, certainly sparked a lot of discourse and attention about it. I know you've seen that. You've responded to some of it. When you did that post on what was it, Saturday evening, when you initially announced that you were going to march, and then also specifically you called it genocide, were you anticipating much or any backlash?
Well, it was more than I expected. Look, the head of Holocaust studies at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, he has said point blank that what is happening in Gaza is a genocide. And several other senior Israeli academics and politicians and former prime ministers have used that word. So I look at what's happening there, and it does look like that to me.
Obviously, there were a lot of people at that march, which has been a point raised. Many people with different perspectives, certainly different political affiliations. Yourself, I guess, got a bit more traction. Some maybe weren't expecting a Libertarian MLC to be amongst the protesters there. When you were marching, were you conscious of the kind of other elements that have been pointed out? People like the Iranian Supreme Leader, that portrait being there, that's been a talking point. Were you at all conscious of that? Were you seeing much of that amongst the thousands in the crowd?
Absolutely not. I marched with Palestinian Christians and some very nice people from the Australian Jewish community who are a minority and who are concerned about human rights abuses. Now, look, Leah, when you have a public rally, you want as many people as possible to come along. You can't say just people, you can't come and you can come. So there's going to be some crazies there. Now, I was heavily involved, proud to have been heavily involved in the anti-COVID lockdown protests. All this, pretty great. The Earth's flat and other things. Not many, okay, but then you'd go to a COVID protest. There would all these be very normal, nice, law-abiding, good Australian people there. Then you'd go home and turn on the news, not Six News, of course, but you'd go home and turn on the mainstream news, and what would you see? Yeah, they'd go and identify the craziest picture they could possibly see, and they say, "Well, this represents the whole protest," which is grossly unfair. Now, look, in terms of people being surprised that there's a libertarian there, many people have the perception that the Libertarian Party is simply the Liberal Party, but more purist, doesn't compromise. And that is largely correct, particularly on economic issues and free speech issues. But there is a very big difference. The Liberal Party and its forebears have always, if Britain or America has decided to go to war, and they just say, "Beauty, we're going to support you as well." The libertarian movement all around the world is an anti-war party. Now, we're not pacifists, but we are very skeptical about how the political class keeps throwing us into the abyss of war. And so this is what a lot of people don't realise, that yes, we are, because we're so skeptical of the government, we're skeptical of the worst thing the government does, which is sending young men like you out to war. Okay, so we are an anti-war party, and so some people have been surprised, but that's because they are not aware of what the libertarian movement stands for. The most articulate voices against this war and other wars are from the libertarian movement.
In terms of the kind of reaction that's gotten for the Libertarian Party more broadly, I know the party did put out a statement, might be making it sound more formal than it was, but, posted it and kind of confirmed that, the Libertarian Party doesn't have formal positions and MLC hasn't broken party rules in terms of you in attending that. I know there was a former vice president who resigned. I'm curious, have you lost or actually gained any members out of this just in the past week?
Look, we might have lost 1 or 2% of members, and I'm sure we've gained some members as well. But I mean, it's look, the libertarian position on foreign policy is that our government should not be meddling in foreign conflicts, and we're all united about that. Now, but we're not. That doesn't mean that we can't have an opinion on what's happening in world conflicts, and so I expressed my opinion.
Just finally, because I know that when you mentioned this on Twitter as well, when you entered Parliament, you joined, Parliamentary Friends of Israel. Certainly, you've had many statements in support of Israel. You've met with people like the Australian Jewish Association. Just for you personally, over the past, what is it, year and a half since October 7, has your view in terms of, I don't just mean Gaza generally, but the broader situation in Israel, Palestine, shifted to a significant extent, just for you personally?
Oh, yes. Well, it has, yes, because it's in line with, I think, mainstream public opinion across the Western world. You look at somebody like Piers Morgan, who's a respected commentator. His trajectory has been very similar to mine. But where I thought that I understood a lot about the history of this subject, and this conflict is all about history. Okay, now, what I have seen is that since 1948, and I wish that in 1948 that the surrounding Arab states accepted the UN peace deal or the UN partition. Now, it wasn't perfect. No one was thrilled about it. Okay. But if we just accepted that peace deal, then maybe Palestine today would be a booming, happy country. They could have friendly relations with Israel. Now, that was a mistake, a tragic, tragic mistake that didn't happen. And I blame the Arabs on that occasion. Now, I know what had happened in the 1920s and the 1930s and the 1940s, and I know that they were understandably cranky, but it's better to just de-escalate. Now, what has happened since 1948 is that Israeli politics has been split between moderate Zionists and radical Zionists. The moderate Zionists really want to have a peace deal. And these are the ones who are saying that Netanyahu is going too far. And they dominated Israeli politics up until about the 1990s. What's happened now is the radical Zionists out there, they are not interested in, they certainly don't want a two-state solution. They want to occupy Gaza. And I suspect they also want to occupy the West Bank. So I'm very much on the side of the peacemakers in Israeli politics.
All right. Always good to chat, John Ruddick. Thank you again for joining us on 6 News.
Thank you, Leo.